sums it up.
In which Marcuse in the United States represented the most radical inclinations of the school, in a sense continuing the work they had done in the 1920s and into the 30s, a work that was inspired by Marxist Hegelian philosophy, very interested in the crisis both of capitalism and liberal democracy, trying to find alternatives to the working class.
As we've seen, the Frankfurt School, Marxist in origin, wanted to create a cultural revolution against Western society. And in the 1930s, they took their important first step. In the 1930s, the work of Horkheimer, Adorno, Fromm, and Marcuse issued in its first tangible product, critical theory. The term critical theory is something of a play on words. One is tempted to ask, what is the theory? The answer is, the theory is to criticize. Through unremitting, destructive criticism of every institution of Western society, they hope to bring that society down. Critical theory is the basis for gay studies, black studies, women's studies, and various other studies departments found on American university campuses today. These departments are the home base of political correctness. David Horowitz was present at the birth of campus political correctness.
Well, I was a radical in the 60s. I was a Marxist. You know, my buddies were people like Tom Hayden. I edited the largest magazine of the left at the time, Ramparts. But the Frankfurt School was important in Marxism because they no longer believed really in the future. They only believed in destroying capitalism and destroying, bourgeois democracy is what we would have called it. And if you look at today's campuses, that kind of nihilism is really the dominant theme. That is, attack America.
The Frankfurt School was careful never to define what critical theory was for, only what it was against. Again, Martin Jay, the Frankfurt School's semi-official historian.
Critical theory itself always felt reluctant about being put in the straitjacket of systematization and defied its reduction to a simple definition.
Critical theory actually attempted to politicize logic itself. Horkheimer wrote, "Logic is not independent of content. That means an argument is logical if it helps destroy Western culture, illogical if it supports it." Such twisted thought lies at the heart of the political correctness now inculcated into American university students.
When there's 1% of the campus is conservative and the other 9% and the other 9% of the people who care are incredibly liberal, you're going to get something approaching a socialist state.
But how did the work of a small group of German Marxist intellectuals come to America? In 1933, when the Nazis came to power in Germany, the Institute for Social Research fled. It fled to New York City, where it was reestablished that same year with help from the president of Columbia University. Once in America, the Frankfurt School gradually shifted the focus of its work from destroying German society and culture to attacking the society and culture of its new place of refuge. Not only did they apply critical theory to American society, they added some new elements. One was the Institute's so-called Studies in Prejudice, which culminated in 1950 in Theodore Adorno's immensely influential book, The Authoritarian Personality. In it, Adorno argued that the American people possessed many fascist traits, and that anyone who supported traditional American culture was psychologically unbalanced. It is no accident that today, the politically correct are quick to label their opponents fascists and suggest that they need psychological treatment in the form of sensitivity training.
People over profits! People over profits!
The Frankfurt School even integrated political correctness' most fashionable cause, environmentalism, into their cultural Marxism, by way of Horkheimer and Adorno's book, Dialectic of Enlightenment.
Well, they were very interested in what was called the domination of nature. Dialectic of Enlightenment in particular moved the emphasis away from economic domination to the species domination of the natural world, including, we might say, internal nature through psychoanalytic understanding of repression. So they were very keen on recognizing that we needed to have a more nurturant and a more, let's say, balanced relation between humankind and the natural world.
After World War II, Horkheimer and Adorno returned to Germany, where the Institute was re-established at Frankfurt University. But not all the old members of the Institute returned. Fatefully, Herbert Marcuse remained in America, eventually becoming a professor at Brandeis and University of California, San Diego. Marcuse labored to finish the intellectual work begun by Horkheimer, Adorno, and Fromm in the 1930s.
Marcuse, on the other hand, remained in the United States, and during the 50s and 60s developed some of their earlier ideas, merging Freud and Marx, interested in aesthetics and interested in cultural, let's say, tendencies towards what he would call negation, which were usable in a campaign to call into question what Antonio Gramsci would have called hegemony of capitalist bourgeois culture. And Marcuse became, of course, the so-called guru of the New Left.
It was Marcuse who finally answered the question posed by Horkheimer in the early 30s. Who could substitute for the working class as an agent of revolution?
So you had to find some new constituency, whether it was students or blacks or women or gays or whatever it was. And Marcuse had a fluid Marxism that fit into this.
Martin Jay confirms the role of the Frankfurt School in creating the victim groups that constitute the politically correct coalition.
But the working class wouldn't play the hegemonic role that traditional Marxism had expected from it. And so students, blacks, other minority groups, women, and so forth were, they hoped at least, able to come together.
Of critical importance for the injection of the Frankfurt School's work into the student rebellion of the 1960s was Marcuse's revival of Fromm's notion of sexual liberation.
Marcuse, however, was the main conduit of ideas. But Marcuse had written one important work in the 1950s called Eros and Civilization, a work which attempted to rub Freud against the grain and come out with a radical, even utopian reading of psychoanalysis. And that, combined with Norman O'Brown's Life Against Death, had a great impact on the counterculture and on emphasizing a libidinal element.
Marcuse's Eros and Civilization condemned all restrictions on sexual behavior, calling instead for polymorphous perversity.
Instead, it argues that at certain early developmental levels of the human psyche, there was a potential for sexual expression, sexual pleasure, which had not yet been organized into the restricted notions of heterosexual sexuality, and that these had some sort of capacity to be reinvigorated.
Polymorphous perversity helped open the door to aspects of political correctness, such as gay liberation.
This is his idea of what human society, a good human society, should be based on, was a certain kind of polymorphous perversity and narcissism, which by liberating non-procreative eros, was his term, we would find great enlightenment and great happiness. This was supposed to be the key to utopia.
David Horowitz ties Eros and Civilization